Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Dan Carroll. He's the field's CTO for cybersecurity at Dell Technologies Federal Systems. Dan, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and so agencies have their marching orders. The Office of Management and Budget, the White House, has directed agencies to put together zero trust plans and start implementing them, meet some big goals by the end of fiscal year 2024. So Dan, I'm wondering if you were advising agencies who are starting to just implement these plans, what would you tell them? Where would you start? What questions and sort of ideas would you have?
Starting with that executive order, what's been interesting is, at least within the Dell Technologies federal arena, when we're talking with organizations, it has really helped us, what I'd say is reinvigorate conversations around cybersecurity. And we really have been working with customers on how to simplify that message, because the key is that everyone has to be in the boat together in order for this to work, right? There isn't a single person who owns cybersecurity and protection of assets. Everyone in concert doing their best has to get in and move along, right? So what we've done is we've tried to help organizations simplify that message, because when you say cybersecurity, that can be a very consuming idea, and helping people understand how cybersecurity really works has been kind of critical and really helped with this zero trust discussion. What we've done at Dell is we've created what we're calling our pillared approach. We have device, user, transport, session, application, and data trust. And then across all of that, you have analytics and logging, and that drives automation and compliance, right? So what has been great is I can have a discussion with zero trust with anybody, from someone who, of course, is in a CTO or CIO space, but also other organizations that really have a lot of influence there that don't realize it, like procurement. Procurement isn't always they buy a lot of IT, but they aren't necessarily heavy IT engineering people. So helping them understand things that they should think about when looking at purchasing has become kind of critical. So what I do is I take my cell phone and I'll go, I have a cell phone. I am a user. I use my user identity to log into my cell phone. I may use a VPN to go across the network to access my email client, and that gives me access to my email, which is data. So I have hit all of the pillars in that simple explanation. And this helps illustrate to them how people, regardless of where they are in the organization or in the enterprise network, play a role in protecting data. We are seeing more and more of these conversations, and being able to break it down for them and help them with that messaging has been critical.
Yeah, and that really seems like a cultural shift, as much as it's a, technology development type process. How do you think we've gotten to that point where folks who aren't IT experts are starting to think more around security, and how can we drive that forward even more as agencies and other organizations adopt zero trust?
Sure. What's been interesting is, I would say, the proliferation of technology within our daily lives has helped people more and more understand the importance of security. We all read the newspapers every day. There's another data breach where someone else's information has been exposed, and people wonder how that happens. Like, how did company X unintentionally provide access to my phone numbers and my social security numbers and all these other things that happen, unfortunately, due to ransomware and malware and all the other bad things that go on there. So people have been kind of drug into the conversation of cybersecurity because it's affecting their personal lives.
Got it. Yeah, it's definitely in the news almost every week, certainly every week, almost every day these days. And I'm wondering, on the more technical side, what challenges are you seeing with organizations that are starting down this journey of starting to think about a zero trust architecture?
Sure. What has been interesting, I would say, is if we look at what's been going on the last couple of years with the pandemic, right? The pandemic changed the world in so many different ways that nobody could have foreseen. And one of those, obviously, within the, what I'd say is the federal government space and in the commercial space too, because you're reading lots of articles on it, remote work, right? The pandemic for the federal space accelerated remote work by at least a decade, right? We would never have seen the proliferation of remote workers that we do. And what happened there was that a lot of agencies and a lot of commercial organizations too, they realized that they had to figure out how to enable their workers to work from home to keep the engine running, right? The engine of our government and the engine of our economy. So they did what they had to do to kind of get that wheel rolling and do what I would say was good enough from a security standpoint to try to lock things down. And now they're going back and reassessing that infrastructure and the solutions that they put out there. They're looking at how do they, improve the security at the edge where those people are working and where they're interacting with data. And I think that continual kind of evaluation from the edge back into the cloud or into the core data center has been critical. And it's raised a lot of new questions on how you secure data wherever it lives, how you act on data wherever it lives. And I think it's going to continue to do that.
Yeah, on those questions, what are some of those big questions, and are there any early answers in terms of securing data at the edge?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So what's been interesting with the edge scenario is in parallel with the pandemic, what was happening even before that is we've seen a huge increase of the capability to do more data, acting on data where it's created, right? So in the past, you would create large amounts of data at the edge and then send it all back for processing or for analytics or other things to run your business. Now, where the increased computational capabilities that are happening at the edge, people are able to set up systems to act on that data and then only send back results. So that means you're minimizing the amount of data traversing your networks, you're minimizing the amount of data that's being exposed both at the edge from what's coming out of it, and then the access that you have to allow to go back to your web solutions or core data center. So that's one of the things. The other things, what I would say is AI and machine learning and predictive analytics have done a lot at the edge to drive the capability to identify risks and do remediation before there's an issue, or identify if there is already an issue occurring, quickly identify it and shut that down. So those are some of the things that we've seen.
And then one of the early trends we're tracking is, a big pillar of the zero trust concept is identity and access management. And I'm wondering, especially with the shift to remote work that you've mentioned, that's especially key. What are some of the early challenges you're seeing with how organizations are approaching identity within a zero trust concept or architecture?
The biggest challenge with organizations that I've talked with has probably trying to help them, either them or the larger organizations they work for, understand the expansion of the idea of identity. When I say identity to someone, they instantly think of a personal identity, like me, my CAC card, or other multi-factor authorization form that I use to get into the network. And they think about the person, which of course, by nature, we all would. But there are devices have identity, right? Like I mentioned a minute ago, my cell phone is a device. It's unique to me. It has its own machine identity that needs authorization to get on the network, or it should. Every other thing connected to your network should be the same way. Every computer, every network device, all of it has identity that has to be accounted for and has to be authorized to do things on the network that it only needs to do to operate and to contribute to the operations and success of the organization. And then when we move past machine identity, we get into things even more interesting like application and service identity, right? When you hear about some of the different exploits that come out, when applications and services start acting in ways that they're not supposed to, they should have their own identity to be able to function on the network, be allowed to access the data or systems they need to work, and then should be monitored to make sure they're not trying to do anything they shouldn't be. So I would say trying to educate on that expansion of the idea of identity is probably one of the biggest things, and then implementing systems and solutions that help them account and control that.
Got it. And in the 30 seconds we have left, as agencies start to go down this path, is there anything else that you'd want to highlight as far as challenges or opportunities when it comes to zero trust?
I would say here's what's been interesting is a lot of people, when the executive order came out, they were like, there's always this reaction of like, we need to start new thinking and throw everything away. Cybersecurity should never be approached in that manner. Most organizations had some sort of cybersecurity model they were pursuing. They should be evaluating that model to see where they're meeting their zero trust goals, and then looking at their processes and tools today. The biggest thing that we've noticed with organizations is they have a number of tools that they aren't even aware are available to them because they weren't exposed during implementation of them. So working with their vendors to understand what else they could be leveraging within their existing infrastructure before and go and buying new elements to enhance their capabilities.
It's a good note to leave it on. Dan, thank you for taking the time today. We appreciate it.
Glad to help.
All right. Again, I'd like to thank today's guest, Dan Carroll, the field CTO for cybersecurity at Dell Technologies Federal Systems. I'm your moderator, Justin Doubleday, and you're listening to Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more on the Zero Trust Cyber Exchange.